Like, I have had times where I was like, I am momming like no other mom has mommed before. I am rocking this parenting thing. I am giving the best lectures I can give. I am pointing the kids in the right direction. And in those times, I felt like God was with me. And then I have had the other times when I'd had no idea what I was doing, when it was hard and it was awful and it was a struggle and I felt lost and didn't know what to do. And in those times, God was with me too. Happy Mother's Day, moms, to all the moms, the biological moms, the adoptive moms, the foster moms, the grandmoms, the spiritual moms, the single moms, the aunties, the sisters, every woman who pours their life into the hearts and the souls and the minds of kids. We thank you and we honor you today. Happy Mother's Day to you. So once upon a time, Judd and I took some of the Central family members on a little trip. And we were gonna be studying the Bible and diving into God's word. We had some awesome worship times. We got to hear about what God was doing in people's hearts and in their lives. And it was an amazing trip. But every amazing trip has to have at least one awful moment. Do you know what I'm talking about? So we had that awful moment. When we got to our destination, I was feeling pretty good. I wanted it to be a picture perfect kind of moment. I wanted to be Instagram ready, right? And so I had put some curls in my hair. So cute hair, check. I had picked out this little blue linen dress to look cute with my sneakers. Cute outfit, check. I had overstuffed my luggage. I am the kind of girl that when I travel, even though I only wear one outfit a day at home, I believe in my heart I need 5 outfits for every day. When I travel, am I the only one? Anybody else do this? And so I stuffed all of my suitcases. So I felt like I was very well prepared. Check. Did I happen to check the weather that day? No, I did not. Did I know it was going to be freezing? No, I did not. Did I understand that they were going to have tornado-like winds on this day? No, I didn't. And so we got to where we were supposed to be unloading our luggage, and I had a few bags with me, like I said, very full. And when we pulled up, the bus was rocking because the wind was so bad. And I looked outside and thought, this is not going to go well for me, really at any level. So I got a hair tie out of my bag. I pulled my hair up. Goodbye, cute hair. I got out of the bus, grabbed my suitcases, and the wind was howling so loudly that you could not hear anything but the wind. So goodbye hearing. Then I started walking with my suitcases to where I needed to drop them off. And I was walking at an angle because the wind was so bad. So I'm fighting for every step. I can feel my suitcases lifting up off of the ground because the wind was so intense. It was the wildest thing I had ever been part of. It was crazy town. I thought like at any minute, I'm gonna see Dorothy and her house fly by. It was crazy. And so we finally get the bags dropped off, and my sweet husband comes up to me and he's like, hey, so I've been yelling your name and I know you couldn't hear me, but I did want to let you know that your dress flew up. And I was like, did it? That's fantastic. And he said, hey, don't worry, I don't think anybody else saw it. And I said, honey, you know everybody saw it. And he was like, no, babe, they were on the bus. So nobody, I said, you mean they were on the bus with nothing to do except look out a giant picture window at me? That's what happened? No, it's fine. So he's telling me the whole time, nobody saw. It's all good. And then this sweet little couple walked up to me and said, oh, so we saw your dress. And I was like, I bet you did. And I have always known for a long time that the Central family knows way more about me than you probably want to know from all of Judd's stories in his messages. And at that moment, I knew the Central family had seen a lot more of me than they ever wanted to see. And so goodbye, my dignity. And it was kind of a rough thing. There was nothing that I wanted more in that moment than to be overlooked. But I know everybody had looked, but I was craving to be overlooked. And I think we all have moments in our life like that, when we have an embarrassing moment, or maybe you just feel like you're in the spotlight and you're kind of a behind the scenes person, and you just wish that everybody would overlook you. But we also have times in our lives where we want anything but to be overlooked. Like we just want to be seen and noticed and known and appreciated. All of us want that in our lives. Maybe you have been putting in a bunch of extra work for like a special project at work, and you've been putting in all of the hours and working so hard on it. You finally get the project done, and nobody at work notices, and nobody says thank you, and you just feel overlooked by your coworkers. Or maybe you're a parent, and you clean up a mess, and 2 seconds after walking off, a child has come to make another mess right behind you. Do you know what I mean? Or you go to the sink and the dishes are like piled up. You take all the time, you do all the dishes, you get everything put away, and then how dare your family get hungry a few hours later and create a whole new load of dishes for you? Or your family believes that there is a laundry fairy somewhere who magically sweeps in and does all the laundry, the washing and the folding, and everything is magical. And you believe that because nobody ever tells you thank you. Nobody ever seems to notice. You feel overlooked by your family. Or maybe you feel overlooked at school, or maybe you feel overlooked with your friends, or maybe you feel overlooked by God. Have you ever been in that place? Over the last couple of weeks, we've been in a series called God Meant It for Good, and we've been looking at the life of Joseph and looking at how God can bring good out of even really challenging, difficult circumstances. It's been a great series so far. If you've missed either of the weeks of it, I want to encourage you to hop on the app or go on the website and give it a listen, because Nick has done such an incredible job the last 2 weeks. It's been so good. But let me give you a tiny little synopsis. So Joseph has been going back between hope and heartache. Hope. God has given him this dream. Your family is going to bow down to you someday. Heartache. His brothers are super jealous of that dream, so they sell him into slavery. Hope. He ends up managing the house of this guy named Potiphar. He was the captain of Pharaoh's guard. Heartache. Potiphar's wife accuses Joseph of false accusation, and they throw him in prison. Hope, heartache, hope, heartache. That has been the story of Joseph's life. And now he is in prison. That's where we pick it up. And he's alone and abandoned, completely overlooked and underappreciated. So what do you do then? What did Joseph do? What can we do? Well, first we can trust that God will help us overcome when we feel overlooked. And that's great news for those of us today who feel overlooked. God can help us overcome anyway. So how do we do that? Well, first, we have to believe God's beside you. You have to believe God's beside you. So we're going to jump into Genesis chapter 30, starting in verse 20. And when we get to the red words on the screen, I want you to yell these out, because this is the Bible. This is God's word. We don't want to just hit it, let it hit our ears. We want to get it in our minds, let it soak all the way down into our hearts. So we want to interact with it. So when we get those red words, I want you to yell them out with me. Here we go. So he, that's Potiphar, took Joseph and threw him into the prison where the king's prisoners were held. And there he remained, but the Lord was what? He was with Joseph in the prison and showed him his faithful love. And the Lord made Joseph a favorite with the prison warden. Before long, the warden put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners and over everything that happened in the prison. The warden had no more worries because Joseph took care of everything. The Lord was what? With him, and caused everything he did to succeed. Joseph had gone from the privilege of his father's house to the pit his brothers threw him in, to becoming property in Egypt. God raised him up to privilege again in the house of Potiphar, and now he finds himself in prison. And even in the darkest, dingiest, most depressing circumstances of Joseph's life, God is still with him. He's still with him, showing him his faithful love, giving him success. There was no height that Joseph could go to that God was not there, and there was no depth that he could fall to that God was not there as well. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I can feel like God is with me in the good times, the easy times, the happy times, the successful times. But when I hit the hard times, the bad times, the sad times, I start to look around and think, God, I don't know where you are. Like, have you ever had highs and lows maybe in your parenting? Like, I have had times where I was like, I am momming like no other mom has mommed before. I am rocking this parenting thing. I am giving the best lectures I can give. I am pointing the kids in the right direction. And in those times, I felt like God was with me. And then I have had the other times when I'd had no idea what I was doing, when it was hard and it was awful and it was a struggle and I felt lost and didn't know what to do. And in those times, God was with me too. And I've had high times in my work life when I felt like everything was going well and I was pursuing a purpose and we were making an impact and we were making a difference. And it was so easy for me to believe that God was with me in the high times. But when it was not high, when everything felt like a struggle, when all the work felt like it was for nothing, like we weren't making a difference, that's when I started to wonder. But God was with me in those times too. Here's what the Bible says in Psalm 139. And we're going to pick it up in verse 7. It says, I can never escape from your spirit. I can never get away from your presence. If I go up to heaven, what? You are there. If I go down to the grave, what? If I ride the wings of the morning, if I dwell by the furthest oceans, even there your hand will guide me, and your strength will support me. I could ask the darkness to hide me and the light around me to become night, but even in the darkness, I cannot hide from you. Now, I don't know about you, but this is very good news for me today. This means that in every hilltop and every valley, God is right there with us. Heaven is not too high, the grave is not too low for the presence of God. The morning light is not too fast for God, and the widest ocean is not too wide for his presence. He is with us all the time, in every corner of the world and in every tiny nook and cranny of our lives. God is with us, which means even if you feel overlooked, God sees you. And he supports you with his hand, and he sustains you with his presence. Because when we believe that God is beside you, that's when we can start to overcome, even when we feel overlooked. Okay, so that's the first thing. We've got to believe God's beside you. Next, we also have to trust God's timing. We got to trust God's timing. Okay, we're going to pop back into Genesis, into the life of Joseph. And here's what it says in Genesis 40, starting in verse 1. Sometime, later, Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and chief baker offended their royal master. So sometime later. So when you read that, you might think some hours later, some weeks later, maybe even some months later. But the kind of Jewish tradition is that Joseph at this point had been in prison for 10 years. So it's not just a few minutes later. This is a whole decade later. And yes, God had risen him up where he was over the prison and in charge of it, but he's still a prisoner. He's still a captive. He's still been wrongly accused. He has had no justice. He has no freedom. He is still a prisoner in the prison for 10 years. Sometime later. And then these two new prisoners show up. because they've offended Pharaoh. So the cupbearer, that's Pharaoh's wine guy. And the baker is Pharaoh's carb guy. I like a good carb, so I'm already on Team Baker, but these are the two guys that have offended Pharaoh. Now, most scholars believe that offending Pharaoh is not like they hurt his feelings or they didn't do something appropriate in the court. Most scholars believe there was some kind of attempted murder plot happening. And so they were trying to figure out which of these two guys did it. This is a classic whodunit. And while the investigation is going on, they throw both of these guys, the leading two suspects, into prison so that they can figure out who has done it. And that's when Joseph runs into them. And they're looking very upset. And Joseph takes the time to stop and talk to them and find out what's going on. Now, I don't know about you, but if I had been in prison wrongly accused for 10 years, then I don't know that I would be taking the time to figure out what's bumming other people out, right? I would be throwing a very classy pity party with confetti and streamers and those horns that you blow, because I would be throwing a class A party, pity party for myself. But thankfully, Joseph is not like me, and he's not sitting around whining about it. He is actually taking the time, even though he should be really hurt himself, to check in on the hurts of other people. And I think this is a good note for us, that when we are in a season of waiting on God, waiting for God to do something, to move in our lives, to open doors for us to walk through, then one of the best things we can do is stop being so self-focused and instead be servant-focused. Like looking for opportunities for God to use us in the lives and in the hearts of other people. And that's exactly what Joseph is doing. And the guys are really bummed out because they've both had dreams. And they're weird and they can't figure out what they mean. But the good news is Joseph is a guy who has had dreams too. And Joseph knows that God is the one who can interpret dreams. So he said, you know what? Why don't you tell me your dream? And I'm gonna see if God will give me the insight to interpret this dream for you. So first up is the cupbearer. And just like the wine guy would, he dreams of a grapevine with 3 branches that have the fruit of grapes on them, and the fruit grows and flourishes. And then in his dream, the cupbearer grabs the cup of Pharaoh and squeezes the juice of the grapes into the cup and hands it back to him. A little weird, but Joseph is up to the task, and he says, you know what? Those 3 branches represent 3 days. And in 3 days, Pharaoh is going to pluck you up out of the prison, and he's going to restore you to your former position. You're going to be the chief cupbearer again. Good news for you. Incredible. And then Joseph kind of throws in on the side, and hey, when you get to Pharaoh, could you tell him I'm in here? Could you tell him I shouldn't be here? I shouldn't even be in this country. I shouldn't be in this prison. If you could get me out of here, God has a purpose for my life, and it's not here. Don't forget about me. And now it's the baker's turn. So the baker has just heard this great interpretation. This guy's gonna get out. He's gonna be free. He gets his old job back. Now I'm gonna get to hear the interpretation of my dream. And in the baker's dream, he has 3 baskets on his head. And guess what the baskets are full of? Pastries, my favorite thing. And so he's carrying around these 3 baskets of pastries, and the birds are coming along, eating out of the top basket. Another kind of odd dream. And I wonder if Joseph took like a really deep breath and said, you know what? Those 3 baskets also represent 3 days. And in 3 days, Pharaoh's gonna pluck you out of prison. And then he's going to impale your body on a pole, and the birds are gonna come and eat your flesh, which is what his dream meant. Bummer to be the baker. Not a good situation for the baker. And so 3 days go by. It's Pharaoh's birthday. He gets them out of prison. He brings them forward. He elevates the cupbearer back to his original position. He impales the baker on a pole. He must have been the guy behind the murder plot. And everything happened just like Joseph said. So I wonder at that point if Joseph started packing his bags. right? This is my chance. I'm getting out of here, guys. Goodbye, great to meet you. I'm on my way out. I told that guy not to forget me, and so here I go. But that's not what happened. So we're gonna pick it up in Genesis 40, starting in verse 23. So Pharaoh's chief cupbearer, however, forgot all about Joseph, never giving him another thought. 2 full what? 2 full years later, Pharaoh dreamed. 2 full years later. Joseph knew he had been forgotten by the cupbearer. And I wonder if in his heart he was worried that he was forgotten by God. Like he knew he had been overlooked by his fellow prisoners. And I wonder if in his quiet moments he felt overlooked by God. He was definitely unappreciated by the guy who he had helped. And I wonder if he was worried that God didn't appreciate him either. So now Joseph is just waiting. And he's waiting, and he's waiting, and he's waiting, and he is stuck at this point between the dreams that God had given him and the fulfillment of those dreams. He's stuck between like the purpose God had planted on his heart and being able to step into that purpose. He's stuck in a waiting season. Have you ever been in a waiting season? Where you're just waiting on God and you're waiting on God. It is a bummer to wait in the grocery store line. And it's sad to wait in traffic on the freeway, but when you're waiting on God to move in your life, that can be almost excruciating sometimes. Like maybe you feel like God has purposed you to be a parent, and you've been struggling with infertility for years, and you've just had heartbreak after heartbreak after heartbreak. And I want you to know that I also know the grief and the pain and the sadness that comes after a miscarriage, and I'm so sorry for you. And maybe like me, you had a moment where you thought, God, are you forgetting about me? Because you put this in my heart and it's not happening. Have you forgotten me? Or maybe you're sick of being single. You're just over it. You're ready to share your life with somebody. You don't want to do the apps anymore. You don't want to do weird, awkward first dates. You don't want to be the third wheel with your friends. You just want to have somebody in your life, and you feel like God has planted that dream in your heart, but it's not happening. And if you're honest, you're starting to feel like maybe God is overlooking you. Or maybe your kids are on the struggle bus right now. They are really having a lot of challenges. Maybe their mental health is in trouble. Things are stressful. They're really at the end of themselves. And to watch your child be in pain is so painful as a parent. Or maybe they're just like making their own choices. You did everything you could. You did everything, not perfectly. There are no perfect parents. I'm not a perfect parent either, but you did the best you could. And you loved them the best you could, and you prayed them to Jesus every day, and they're still off doing their own thing, and you've been waiting on God to bring them back, and you're waiting on them. And you just wonder if all of this parenting work you've done is being unappreciated by God. Or maybe you had a dream that God gave you to start a business, or to write that book, or to go back to school, or to get that new job, and it feels like every single door is closing. And you got the dream, but it's not fulfilled, and so now you're stuck in this weird waiting spot. I don't know what the wait is for you. I've had that season many times in my life. So what I want to do is share with you just 3 prayers that I pray in seasons of waiting, that hopefully you can start praying if you're in a waiting season right now, or next time you're in a waiting season. And hopefully these can keep you in a prayerful place in your waiting season instead of a frustrated place. So here's the first one. Lord, help me trust your timing. God, help me trust your timing. Joseph had spent, now at this point, 13 years stuck in a waiting season. 1 year he was in Potiphar's house, 12 years he's been in prison. He was 17 years old when he got that dream. He's 30 years old now, and not a lot has gone right in his life. And he's been waiting and waiting and waiting for God to move. And frankly, Joseph tried to jump ahead of God 2 years before by trying to get the baker to get him on out of there. But I don't know about you, but I can't remember one time in my life where I tried to jump ahead of God's timing that worked out well for me. Because we don't want to do the right thing in our right time. What we want to do is the right thing in God's right time. And when we can trust his timing, what starts to happen is that we get stronger. We develop like an endurance. We get a perseverance. And I think we start to learn to rest in God's peace like we've never rested in it before. So God, help us trust your timing. And I'm telling you right now, sometimes in certain seasons, I've had to pray that 50 times a day. Help me trust your timing. Help me trust your timing. Help me trust your timing. Help me trust you, right? So that's what we've got to keep doing. The second thing is, here's the second prayer. Jesus, use this time to teach me. Because we don't want our waiting seasons to be wasted seasons. Because maybe what God is doing is he's trying to work. He's trying to work in your life, in your heart. That's exactly what he was doing with Joseph. Joseph is about to become second in command to Pharaoh. He is about to be in charge of the salvation and to keep an entire nation from starvation, including saving his very own family. And the only way he can do that is if he has learned some serious leadership lessons and developed a skill set to be able to posture him in the right place at the right time, doing the right job that will save an entire people group. And the only way God could do that is to put him through the training ground of 13 years of learning from the very, very bottom up. He needed those skills. And the truth is, a lot of times when we're in the waiting season, that's when God is ready to work. That's when he wants to grow you and stretch you and teach you. So he wants you to read the books. He wants you to go back to school. He wants you to dig into God's word. He wants you to surround yourself with the wisdom of other Christian people. He wants you to build a spiritual depth that is going to sustain you as you step into the calling that God has next for your life. Wouldn't it be sad if our waiting season ended and we weren't ready? We weren't ready for whatever God has next. So let him work and teach us. Here's the third prayer. God, form my character so it can sustain my calling. Joseph is about to be elevated to a very high rank, high position, high influence. And if he had not been brought to absolute humility, then he was at risk of letting all of that go to his head and then having it all crumble down around him. And wouldn't it be awful if we finally got everything we wanted, but we did not have the integrity to sustain it? So what we want to do is pray, God, develop me into the man, the woman, the son, the daughter, the worker, the servant of you that you want me to be, so that when you open the door and you give me my next step, I am ready. And then I'm gonna have the character and I'm gonna have the integrity to sustain it, because all this time you're developing in me loyalty and you're developing in me strength and love and compassion and patience. And as you develop those things, God, it's preparing me for what you want next. So those are 3 prayers we can pray. We just wanna let God work while we wait. Because a waiting season isn't a wasted season, it's God's working season. So we want to let him work in us. Last summer, I met a group of people that were in a pretty significant waiting season. I was in Uganda. I had gone with a bunch of ministry leaders, and we were partnering with church leaders and ministry leaders in Africa and seeing all the work that God was doing there, and then figuring out how can we come alongside people and partner with them and really try to help them as they kind of reach their communities for the Lord. And I met a pastor named Pastor Joseph and his beautiful wife, Bernadette, and was hearing about all that God was doing, got to meet their worship team, got to be at their beautiful church. And we were asking Pastor Joseph, like, what is the one thing you feel like your community needs? And he did not even hesitate. He said, my community needs water. We just need clean water. And Pastor Joseph had a dream. You see, there were 2,000 people in that community, and the single water source that they had spoiled. So now people had to walk 45 minutes each way to go access water from ponds or rivers. And it's not clean water because animals use those same ponds and rivers. So they would walk an hour and a half round trip to get dirty water that then they would go take home and pray that they had enough money to get firewood so that they could boil the water so it was safe to drink and to cook with. And what was happening is kids were getting sick. People were exhausted. They were taking a lot of time that honestly they needed to be working so that they could have an income to provide for their families. And God had given Pastor Joseph this dream. What would happen if we could build a well right on the church property? And as people from the community stopped having to walk an hour and a half and could just walk to church and get water every day, Pastor Joseph believed that he could meet them at the well and help them get their water. And while he was doing that, he could help teach them about the living water that is Jesus, the spring of life that will never run out and never run dry and never spoil. But Pastor Joseph was in a waiting season, waiting between the time that God had given him a dream of providing clean water and providing an opportunity for people to meet Jesus and the fulfillment of that dream. And he was waiting and he was waiting and he was waiting. But all the time he was waiting, God was working. And he was working on the heart of a pastor's wife in Vegas who was going to show up in Uganda and was going to attach my heart to his. And we were going to figure out a way to make sure that that community got clean water. So in October, at the Leading and Loving It conference, which is our women's conference that we have here, many of you were there and got to be part of our efforts to link arms with Pastor Joseph and Bernadette and raise the money for that well. So this summer I get to go back to Uganda, and I get to go back to that church, and I get to stand beside Pastor Joseph and praise the Lord as he dedicates the well on his church property. Amazing. And I wonder how many times Pastor Joseph felt overlooked. Overlooked by the community, overlooked by his country, overlooked by other Christians, overlooked by the world, but he was never overlooked by God. Not one time, because God is an overcomer. And all the while he was working, and he was working to make sure that his purpose would be fulfilled. And just like he did that for Pastor Joseph, I want to make you know today that God has not overlooked you either. He has not overlooked you because he is an overcomer. And even though you feel overlooked, or even if you're in a waiting season, God is working. He is working. He is working because he will see his purpose come to fruition. Because he is a God who fulfills the dreams that he has planted in the hearts of his people.